Well, let's make sure this whole thing works properly. All right, we're rocking and rolling with gas now. Ed Stoddard,
We are.
you got a vape, you got a rosé. You're in fine form this evening.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've come off the wagon now. So it's in January.
Well, you get to talk about something cool today instead of being at a mining indaba all day.
Yes.
Well, good. Ed Stoddard, welcome to the Blood Origins podcast. Probably this is your first time on the Blood Origins podcast, correct?
It certainly is.
Probably not the last time that we speak, because you get yourself involved in, dare I say, controversial issues.
Yes, I would say they're controversial because people have a range of perspectives on wildlife and conservation issues.
Is that your general interest?
It's one of many, yes, but it's one of my focus areas, that's for sure. I'm also, I mean, as a journalist, I throw a wide net, if I can say that. I mean, I'm also a financial journalist, so but I do try to connect. I do try to connect the dots, though, between the economy, business, and the social side with water, wildlife, and conservation side of things, because they all have to. They're all connected.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, Ed Stoddard, welcome to the Blood Origins podcast. Would you introduce yourself, what you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, so Ed Stoddard, I'm a Johannesburg-based journalist. I hail from Nova Scotia in Canada. I was a Reuters correspondent for 24 years. I took early retirement a few years ago. I mostly write for the South African online publication, the Daily Maverick, these days. I've been published in U.S. publications such as Undark, Mother Jones, Salon, Slate, The Atlantic, and mostly on wildlife and environmental issues. And I'm a keen fly fisherman, and I also hunt, and I have, and so in terms of the various branches that come out from the wider conservation tree, I suppose, in the sustainable use camp, you could call
100%.
it.
Do you get has anybody called out your journalistic integrity because you happen to be a hunter?
No, in fact, I mean, if somebody is stridently opposed to hunting, then they're also biased, right? I mean, we all have our I wouldn't call it agendas, but we all have our perspectives.
Yep.
And so, no, I haven't been called. I haven't been called out on that. Look, I do a lot more fly fishing than I do hunting. Partly because partly because in South Africa, I do it 12 months of the year. I mean, I'm going bass fishing tomorrow, for example.
Did you happen to catch any yellow fish whilst we were together in November on the Vaal River?
No, I didn't. And this season so far has been a bit elusive to me for yellowfish, though. This month and calendar year so far, because I do keep a fairly detailed outdoor diary, I have caught a few barbel, which is a kind of catfish, and bass so far this year, and it's all strictly fly fishing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Ed, we have you on specifically to talk about something that's happening in Africa. I have had the pleasure of interacting with Michael Labuschagne. I've had several conversations with Michael Labuschagne. If people are listening to this podcast right now and are wondering, like, what is Michael? Who is Michael? What are they about to start talking about? I would suggest you pause this podcast right now and go back and listen to the Michael Labuschagne podcast that we will release prior to this podcast. because it gives you depth and context to what we are about to talk about, specifically in Zambia and Kasungu National Park. And so I wanted to have you on here, and we talk about you in that other podcast, because it's all good and well Michael saying X, Y, Z about Kasungu. I've never been there. I can't validate anything he's saying. But as I understand it, he invited you up to spend time with him on the ground in Kasungu.
Yes, that's right. I was there in the last week of June on the Zambian side. Yes, that's right. On the Zambian side. And so just to put it into context for your listeners, so Kasungu National Park is a park in Malawi. It borders with Zambia. But the park is completely in Malawi. And a couple of years ago, the International Fund for Animal Welfare, IFAW, and African Parks, although the latter have since removed themselves from the equation, interestingly. But anyway, translocated over 260 elephants to Kasungu from another national park in Malawi. All great. It was built, I believe, as the biggest elephant translocation ever. But the problem is that Kasungu is not completely fenced, and on the Zambian side, there's no fence. And what you have on the Zambian side, and I could see it clearly because I was in several places there. You can see the park line quite clearly because it's a tree line.
Is it a fence?
No, that's what I'm saying. There is no fence. There is no fence, and so you can see, but you can see the park line and hence the international border as well quite clearly because there's a tree line, and the reason why the tree line sticks out is because you have cultivated fields right up to the edge of it, which are mostly cultivated by poor subsistence farmers who rely on the rains. And so what could go wrong? So, of course, lots of things went wrong. One of the factors, of course, was the intense El Nino last year, which caused devastation to crops in southern Africa, particularly
there was a very, very big sustained drought in southern Africa.
That's right. There was a big sustained drought during the summer growing season here last year. So for folks up north, we are currently in summertime here, right? Mm-hmm. And El Nino really unleashed its claws in February and March last year. Zambia lost about half of its maize crop, and white maize is really the staple crop in this region. And outside of southern Africa, it's really only grown in Mexico and a little bit in the U.S. And it's grown in Mexico for things like tortillas and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's grown in the U.S., for Taco Bell and things like that, right? And for the and for the Latino population in America. But here it's really it's the staple crop. It's what people live and die by it. Literally,
every meal they're literally eating a maize meal, which is almost like it's not a porridge, but it's a maize. It's like grits, but finer than grits that clumps up, that they can use, and they can dip it in tomato relish, or if they've got protein and make a meat stew, they can dip it in the gravy and put meat in it and stuff.
Exactly. So what happened was,
so Mike invited you up. Why did Mike invite you up?
Well, Mike invited me up because he saw an opinion piece I wrote about the issue, and that was based on what I had seen from other reporting. So actually, one of his daughters, who lives in New Zealand, reached out to me, and I spoke to Daily Maverick, and I managed to cobble together a trip. We flew to Lusaka. We drove east to the area. Mike and I actually camped out 2 nights illegally in the park. We pitched small tents just across the Zambian border, in like a few meters in the park. And what I saw certainly corroborated everything that Mike was saying. I described it as a landscape of fear and loathing had been unleashed on those poor people. So these are people who almost everybody I spoke to had never seen an elephant before in their life. And this is one of the things, right? So people in the West sometimes have this kind of Tarzan or Disney view of Africa, where poor Black Africans are like the extras on the TVs on the set, but these people, of course, had never seen an elephant before in their life, and suddenly they're subjected to their crops are being raided. Their very modest brick homes are being smashed and destroyed because they often store their grain in their homes, their maize. In this case, their withered maize harvest. Many people there used to walk around at night all the time. They had no fear. People have been reduced to the indignity of actually urinating in buckets in their homes because these people don't have indoor plumbing. And so they're doing that at night because they're afraid to go outside. And so the entire social structure of the region, as well as the economy and their life source, has been completely disrupted by this botched translocation done by an animal welfare organization that claims to care about animals, and we'll get to that, but shows absolute disdain for the lives of poor Black Africans who they regard as powerless because they are poor Black Africans, and so they believe they are voiceless.
Mike, you saw this. You saw the maize fields being trampled. You saw the houses. Oh, sorry, I thought Ed, correct, Ed. You saw this yourself. Crop fields being demolished, houses.
I saw the smashed houses. I saw places where elephants had just been a day or two before, and you could see the fresh tracks, the fresh dung. Yeah, and you could see the destroyed crops, and especially the fresh dung. I don't claim to be a great tracker, so to determine the age of a track, for me, even though I do a bit of hunting, that's not my area of expertise. But the fresh dung tells it all. You can tell when an elephant has probably had a bowel movement a couple of days ago, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So right there in the fields, you could see it, the smashed houses, and of course, I believe the body count now in terms of human lives is, I believe there's been 12 people who have been killed. 11 or 12 have been killed by the elephants. One man was killed by a hippo that appears to have been kind of dislodged by the elephants. One man was late last year, was killed by a hyena. He was basically disemboweled and castrated. And, the theory is that the hyenas, for whatever reason, are following the elephants out of the park. And I saw an example of that one night quite starkly when I was with Mike, and I wrote about it. But anyway, we were in this one village that was really the back of the beyond, and the park was about 400 meters away. Again, this telltale, the tree line is there. We had pitched our tents in the park, and we were sitting around with the village head woman in this village. We were eating goat and maize meal. And suddenly and it was after dark, and suddenly there was a massive commotion. And then we were told that hyenas had just come in and snatched a goat, a live goat. I mean, not the one we were eating, right? And made off for the park. And kind of to my astonishment, three of the young men who were sitting around a big fire pulled sticks out of the fire, like to use as torches. And one of them grabbed an axe, and they made off after the hyenas because it was a pair.
Jeez.
And Mike said to me, he said, well, that goat's a goner. And I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure. And about 15, 20 minutes later, they came back with a disemboweled goat. They had gone into the bush at night to do battle with hyenas to get their goat back because livestock, in this case goats, was the only asset they had left because of the devastation wrought by the elephants and the drought. That two-punch combination. And the goat, of course, had been disemboweled. Because that's what hyenas do. They go for the liver, they go for the heart, that kind of thing. For me, it was I've reported in Africa for a long time. I've reported in conflict zones in DRC and Nigeria and things like that. And this is just one of the craziest things I'd ever seen happen. And it just underscored the desperation of these poor people.
Ed, tell me about Mike's relationships with these people. It sounded like Mike had been there. He'd been living with them for many, many years. What did you see and experience?
Mike, everybody calls him Father Mike. He is hugely respected. And his NGO is called Warm Heart. And, people can see that. And Malawi, of course, is called the Warm Heart of Africa. And, he has a big heart and people can intuitively understand that.
Is Mike doing this just for fame? Like, I want to get my name out there and I just want to be the big man in charge?
No, I don't think so. He doesn't strike me as being that kind of person at all. Trust me, he's very committed to this issue. he's and spent a lot of his own money as well as his time on it. This is something that he feels passionately about. I mean, I spent 6 days with him up there. So I know, and I've had many interactions with him since. I mean, on WhatsApp and email and what have you. And this is something that, and this is something he feels strongly about because he feels that a grave injustice has been done.
Yeah, why? That was my next question. Why do you think he feels so strongly about it?
Sorry?
That was my next question. Why do you think he feels so strongly about it?
Well, because he sees a grave injustice being done. Because a grave injustice has been done. These people have been. So I have a concept I call the final poverty line. So basically, if especially in Africa, but not just Africa, but it's, for the most part, I mean, there are parts of Asia and I suppose even South America where it might apply. But if you live in constant fear of big animal attack, crocodile, hippo, lion, leopard, elephant, buffalo, then chances are you are among the poorest of the poor, because these are the people who are exposed to such attack. And so you actually inhabit a terrifying place that I call the final poverty line. You're below it. The usual solution, people rise above the final poverty line by eliminating the source of their terror. And this is also happening around Kasungu. We have no idea how many of these elephants have been killed, either by poisoning or shooting. And, IFAW might call it retaliatory attacks, but it's like it's defensive. I mean, this is what people do. I'm a subscriber to the overkill theory regarding the Pleistocene extinctions, which holds, that as Homo sapiens moved out of Africa 60, 70, 80,000 years ago, one of the striking features of biogeography is that big animals went extinct in their wake, be it mammoths, mastodons, other elephant species, numerous carnivores. And we know one of the things that these animals all have in common is that they are dangerous from a human perspective. So this is how you raise yourself above the final poverty line. Besides creating a barrier between Homo sapiens and big dangerous wildlife, you exterminate the big dangerous wildlife because you don't want your kids or kin, you don't want your children playing around with that. And none of IFAW's donors in the West would tolerate a situation where their children couldn't go out to play because they might get trampled by an elephant or eaten by a lion. But somehow it's okay for poor Black Africans to be subjected to that terror.
Do you think any of I4's donors know the consequence of their, say, donations?
Well, I mean, I'm not the only person who's written about it. The Financial Times has as well. The Guardian. It's certainly been on the radar screen of the UK press. And I recently met up with a U.S. conservation and wildlife journalist here in Johannesburg, who was also recently up with Mike in Malawi. So she's going to be writing for a U.S. publication about this issue. So I would hope that IFAW's donors are starting to realize the consequences of its really reckless and irresponsible actions, which Mike calls it conservation imperialism, and it certainly does show a complete disregard for the lives of poor Africans, and then also shows a disregard for elephant welfare.
I assume no consultation was done on the Zambian side.
No consultation was done on the Zambian side. I actually spoke to one of the local chiefs, as well as a local politician. And if consultation is done, it will be through them and then to the wider community. And
so none was done through them.
This chief was adamant that they were just told that this was going to happen. That was the extent of the consultation. I know IFAW has claimed that there's been widespread consultation, and my reporting on the ground suggests that that is a steaming pile of elephant dung.
Ed, why did they build a fence?
Because it costs money. The other thing is, IFAW is all about this whole room to roam concept.
Okay.
Elephants need room to roam. So it would cost money, and it would have delayed the construction. I mean, sorry, it would have delayed the translocation. And I suppose they want to do this to impress their donors, so they would open their wallets.
Mike, what do you think about that room to roam? Mike, I keep calling you Mike. Ed. Ed, what do you think about this room to roam idea, especially in the light that African population currently 2.3 billion, predicted to be 5 billion by 2050?
Well, there's just less room to roam for elephants, and while it's a noble goal to aspire to, the South African model is basically defense elephants. Actually, defense big five, except you can't do that with leopards, right?
Right.
And that's, and it's revealing because, South Africa is the most industrialized and advanced economy on the continent. And that is a response of a relatively affluent, industrialized economy which also, has a significant commercial agriculture sector, which is capital intensive. Its response to the presence of big, dangerous animals is to create barriers, is to fence the animals in. And if people in the West think, oh my God, well, it's like, you had elephants in Germany at one point, but you're not going to tolerate them there now. Where I'm from in Nova Scotia, we had mammoths. But if anybody said, oh, we're going to come and release 50 elephants in Nova Scotia now and just let them, run around, give them room to roam, I mean, it would be inconceivable, right?
Yeah,
where you're at,
like
you're in Mississippi, right?
Yep.
Oh, can you imagine that? Okay, we're going to release 100. We're going to release 100 elephants in Mississippi, and we're just going to let them roam around.
Yeah, the timber industry would not be happy.
Soon. Well, you'd have 100 dead elephants, right?
Oh yeah, very quickly, especially with the rednecks around here.
Yeah. Never mind. I mean, anybody, right? I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's something that in the very polarized political environment in America right now, that's something that Republicans and Democrats would both agree on. And it's perhaps revealing that apartheid ended over 30 years ago, but fencing in South Africa is something that the ANC has maintained. It's a conservation policy that they inherited from the apartheid regime. That they're like, yeah, of course, because people get killed. It's putting, it is putting human life above. Well, it's showing respect for human life, basically.
Did I4 just not think about humans? Or the consequence of the action on humans?
I'm sure they did. And also, I mean, I pointed out, they put out some statement saying, that this is what happens in Africa. It's just like, really? That is such a racist statement to make. And which is interesting because, people, I thought, would consider itself to be part of the progressive left. But it's actually showing itself to be incredibly racist towards Black African rural residents. It's not part of the progressive left at all. But that's what the way people, but that's why that's how people see things, right? They see, the bunny huggers are all part of the left, and the hunters are all part of the right, and it's very different. Socially, I'm actually very liberal and progressive, but I hunt and I fish. I don't go to church, but I hunt and fish.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very liberal. And, and I don't like to use the term I believe in climate change. I mean, I know climate change is happening uh, because of the science behind it, and
Yep.
because I hunt and fish, I can I can see it. I can see it I can see how the climate is changing over the decades.
Yep. Yep.
And it's one of the. But sorry, that's a bit of a digression. But IFAW has shown itself to be callously racist, actually, on this front. I mean, they may as well put on a hood and burn a cross there.
What's the next steps here, Ed? Like, what do we do?
Well, like I said, there's a couple of things that are bubbling, which I'm privy to. But there is legal action in the offing, which will be a long process, but it could also, among other things, compel IFAW to build a fence.
To make things right.
And I don't know how, and I don't exactly know currently now how the Zambian government sees things. I know the Zambian government, I don't think, is very happy with what's going on. And within SADC, so for your regions, basically the Southern Africa kind of political grouping, which often likes to show solidarity. I think the Zambians are very angry at Malawian government over this. I mean, Malawians, by the way, are also suffering because a big chunk of Kasungu along on the Malawian side is also not fenced. So
Are they seeing human wildlife conflict too?
Yes, in a big way. I mean, like I say, I saw that in Zambia. I just camped on the edge in Malawi, but on the Malawian side, there's also been a significant increase in human wildlife conflicts, my understanding. And I did also speak to people who came from the Malawian side across the border to speak with me. I mean, including one woman who's, her infant son who was on her back never got to meet his father because while she was pregnant, his father was killed by an elephant on the Malawian side.
So there has been people deaths on the Malawi side too.
Yes, there have been. Yes, there have been deaths on both sides because of this completely ill-conceived elephant translocation. I mean, these kinds of translocations and what's called rewilding. I mean, if this stuff is done properly, it's a force for good. But again, some rewilders in their wildest dreams would like to reintroduce elephants to Europe and North America and things like that, and rhinos because because they went extinct in the Pleistocene, and there is a school of thought. It's contentious, but there's a school of thought that it wasn't climate change that did that, but that it was early human hunters. And just to return to that subject, I've scoured this academic literature quite thoroughly, and none of the paleontologists who study this have suggested to me, which is the obvious reason, is that's human wildlife conflict. I mean, if that's the case, because if people were, 11,000 years ago, were killing mammoths and mastodons in North America and wiping them out just to eat. I mean, there weren't enough humans to consume all that flesh, right? I mean, they weren't like Jabba the Hutt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. The only sensible explanation is human wildlife conflict, as far as I can see. And if you look what happens in societies that face human wildlife conflict, that's what happens. People want to kill the animals that, are going to eat their children or trample their children. It's a perfectly understandable response.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a sad situation that's happening. Obviously, the idea, as we've both said, the idea of room to roam, the idea of relocating or reintroducing animals into certain areas is a good one. It's a laudable goal, but you have to understand the human landscape, the social landscape in which you're adding these wildlife to, and you have to almost at the forefront of your thinking focus on this human wildlife conflict first and foremost and how to
Yes,
mitigate
of
it.
course. For both animals and people.
Correct.
Because the animals are losers as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Everybody, human wildlife conflict, everybody loses.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's no winners.
Yep.
Ultimately, and it's terrifying. People don't. I mean, people will suffer from PTSD and things like that. People don't realize that. I mean, the great Vietnam War movie Apocalypse Now from 1979. There's a scene in it where this guy called Chef, and he's from Louisiana, is walking with the officer who's portrayed by Martin Sheen, and they've gone to search for mangoes in the jungle. And this guy has just seen so much crazy stuff. I mean, he's seen a colonel take a beach from the Viet Cong because he wants to surf there, right? I mean, he's seen complete madness, but he's still okay. But they think they hear the Viet Cong in the jungle. So they've got their weapons at the ready. But it's because of the noises that the animals are making. And what springs out at them? A tiger. And it just drives him over the edge. He goes completely crazy. He goes completely insane because he's been charged by something that wants to eat him. That's the thing that's pushed him over the edge. And, for me, that's one of the most insightful scenes from that movie. And I don't know if Francis Ford Coppola had meant, to drive that kind of message home, but he actually did. And you can, I mean, it's easy to Google a tiger scene, Apocalypse Now, right? You can see it on YouTube. But, this guy goes complete, that's what pushes him over the edge. So it's an absolutely terrifying realm. Of course, I mean, if a dog comes at you, a domestic dog comes at you, you're frightened. If its teeth are bared and it's I mean, so you can imagine an elephant or a tiger or a lion. It's a terrifying way to live. And again, nobody in the West wants to subject their children to that kind of risk or terror. But somehow it seems acceptable for Africans because they've always lived like that or whatever is this kind of stereotype. And like I say, I mean, in the case of the Zambian side of Kasungu, none of these people had ever laid eyes on an elephant before. They'd seen them in books or documentaries. Elephants were as alien to them as somebody living in Mississippi or Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Well, Ed, we're going to be tracking this pretty closely, and we may have you back as things start developing. We'll probably have Mike back as things develop. We may have you and Mike together. But
okay, I've got more stories coming out about this.
Oh, I know you do. Well, let us know how else we can help you. We're a big fan of you, big fan of your writings. I appreciate the fact that we got all the technological challenges out of the way. We managed to do this. So thank you. Really appreciate you.
No, thank you. I'm glad to speak about this issue to your audience.
All right.